So let's go back to the code, and we need to go to the TS file. I'm not going to copy this because this function is going to be pretty different from all these functions that we have here, because we're not going to be making any calls to the backend or dealing with observables or anything like that. So I'm going to go to the bottom and see if I can scroll up a little bit so you guys can see. And then I'm going to call this print report or something. You can name these whatever you want. And it's not going to take any parameters, and we're just going to access the HTML element for the table and then work with that. So that's going to return void. And then here what we want to do is to just define some variables. So let the data type, we need to define that, and we're going to set this equal to application. So that's like application/JSON, like the MIME type of a spreadsheet. And I think what I chose, I looked this up and I chose a vnd.ms-excel.sheet.macro enable.12. And if this is incorrect, like if I have a spelling mistake in this, it's just not going to work, and we can deal with this later. And then we need to define the table. So let's say let's say table select. And I'm coming up with these variable names as I go, so feel free to change them if they don't make sense to you. And let's get the table. So document.getElementById again. And I think I have an ID on that table, but I don't remember what it is. So we're gonna have to go and look up that ID. So let's go back and okay, so you can see at the table. So this is what we're looking for, the table tag right there. So we need to copy this ID and put it in here, just like that. Okay, so we're gonna grab the table as an element, like an HTML element, and we want this in encoded URL. So I'm gonna define a table HTML. So that's like the HTML representation in a more HTML or URL encoded format. And I'm gonna call the table select dot outer HTML and call the replace, because we need to replace the space with the encoded URL value for space, because if you don't do that, then it's not gonna work. And I'm gonna put / space / and then a G. And then I'm gonna say replace this with the URL encoded for space, which is %20. So %20. And that's gonna replace all the space with this URL encoded value for space. And this is important because otherwise it's not gonna work. And then I need to create a link. So I'm gonna say let download link. So this is gonna be like the link to download, but we're not gonna show it to the UI. We're gonna click it programmatically, and I'm gonna say document.createElement because I'm trying to create an element. So we're gonna say create element. We need to create an enter tag. So we're gonna say A. So you can put uppercase A, lowercase a, but I would go with lowercase. And then we need to add this link to the HTML. So we're gonna say document.body. So we're gonna add it to the body and then append child. And then we're gonna pass in the link. So now this link is in the HTML as a tag. Okay, so that means that at some point we have to remove it, because if the user keeps pressing this, unless they refresh the page, then we're gonna keep adding this element into the HTML, and we don't want to do that because that's just a bad design. And then we need to set the href, so downloadable link, href, which is a property on this. We're gonna set it equal to data, and we want the data type. So we're gonna say data type, so data type, and then we need a comma. So I'm gonna put quotes and then comma and a space, and then I need to pass in my table. So here that's gonna be the table HTML. So that's the href on the link. So it's data dash this data type. We could have all of this in one line, by the way, and then we pass in the table. Now we need to give a name to the file. So I'm gonna say downloadable link that you do that by calling the download, and then you set whatever name that you want. In this case, I'm gonna say server-report.xls. So that's extension, and we just need to click it. So let's do downloadable link, or I keep saying downloadable link, download link, and just click it. So after we click it, we also need to remove it from the document or from the body. So I'm gonna see if I can duplicate this line and then bring this down. I'm gonna do Control-Z because I copied the wrong one. So that's the one, and then Alt down arrow key, and I need to do remove. So we're gonna say remove child, and then we pass in the same downloadable link. So every time we click it, it's gonna do all this, create the link and everything, process the table, give the user the option to download this by just calling the click, and then remove it from the UI or from the HTML markup. And feel free to simplify this if you want. Obviously, some of these variables I didn't really have to define them, but feel free to modify this in however you want. So now all we have to do is to just call this function on that button. So let's just copy this, and we're gonna go back to the UI, scroll up, and we're gonna look for this button, which is right here. You can see print report, just a regular button, and we can just add in a click listener. So we're gonna say whenever you hear a click event occur, then call our function. And of course, this function doesn't take anything. We're just gonna call it, and it's just gonna do everything. So now if we go back, there's no error, everything refreshed properly, and I'm gonna go ahead and print. You can see it at the bottom here. Okay, so the reason it didn't prompt me is because I'm not logged in. So you have to be logged in as a user for the browser to prompt you. At least that's what I've seen, but you can see that it's downloaded here at the bottom, and I can click it to open it. I'm gonna say yes, and there you go. So I can enable editing. What I usually do, well, if you've done anything with data, you know that data needs to be cleaned, and I can just select all these images, delete them, and select these two, and then delete them. Probably have all of the borders and bring this in the middle, zoom in, and there's your data. Another thing you can do is, instead of having this in Excel, like a spreadsheet like this, you can have it as a PDF. So to do this, which is also pretty easy, let's go back to the code. And what you can do is to just call the window.print. So we're gonna say window.print. You can see it's coming up here. Of course, it's a function. We need to add open and close parentheses and semicolon. And we don't want to do all this, so I'm gonna put all this and comment. When we call window print, it's going to give the default option from the browser to save the information, and then we can choose to save it as a PDF. So now if we go back and click on print again, you can see now we have this option, and we can just save it as a PDF. You can see here we can print it, or we can save it as a PDF, and you can see it's really, really nice. It looks really nice. So I'm not gonna do this. I just wanted to show you this. Let's go back to the code. If you want to do this, you can, but in my case, I'm not gonna do it. So I'm gonna uncomment this and then comment the first one out. And you can make this function take a value. You probably will need to make this like a drop down or something so the user can select, or you can add another button. I wouldn't add another button because it would be like redundant, but this button could be like print report or something. And then when they click it, they have a drop down like this, and they can select either to have it printed in a PDF format or as an Excel file. So it's up to you. I just thought that I would show you this, but I'm not gonna do this implementation. But feel free to do that to enhance your user experience or make it a lot better. So at this point, we have all of our features working. So you can go ahead and test this more, of course, but everything should be working. You know, pinging a server, delete a server, add a new server and all that. So all this stuff should be working. Filter all the servers, all of this should be working. So now what we have to do is to show the little notification. So whenever, you know, we take an action here or we get some response from the backend, we want to show a little notification, the same one that you see when you're using Gmail. We have this little black message, like a little pop-up window that's very small. It's like a little notification, and then it tells you, you know, it gives you some information like, hey, this was successful, or you can't delete this because of whatever reason. So I want to implement something similar, and it's really overkill for this application, but I'm just giving you ideas. I'm just showing you how things can be done, and then you can take this information and then apply it to a much bigger application, a much more complicated application. So let's go ahead and work on that.